Good morning. Welcome to Forum on this beautiful Wednesday morning. I had this big introduction planned, and then I helped put the handouts out on the table, and I really doubt if I need to tell you that you're here for Envision 2040. I think you can probably read that. So I'm just going to introduce the two speakers and let them get into that. I think we have a full morning plan. So please, let me introduce to you Gary Baker, Senior Planner of the City of Montrose. He joined the city in 1999. He has an MA in Political Science, MCRP in Community and Regional Planning, and is a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. Thank you. And Amy Sharp. Amy Sharp is a Plan 2 for the city and leading the efforts for the comprehensive plan process. She joined the city just in January of 2019 and has over 10 years of experience in writing master plans and project management for both the federal government and nonprofit organizations. So help me welcome these two to talk about
Good morning. As Judy Ann said, I'm Gary Baker, Senior Planner with the City of Montrose. I'm going to figure out where to stand here. Right in front of the speaker might not be the best place. All right. So we're going to talk about, I'm going to first talk about the structure of today's presentation. We're going to be talking about these topics. What is a comprehensive plan? Meeting summaries, vision and guiding principles, existing growth trends, and opportunities to get involved. That photo on the lower left is a photo that I think really emphasizes the importance of planning. Cut now. Okay. So that photo was taken during the floods on the Front Range, specifically in Boulder, in 2013. I took that photo. As you may be able to recognize, that's not actually a creek most of the time. That is an off-street recreation trail for walking and biking. And during the flood, the good planning that Boulder had put in place enabled that to function as a stormwater channel. As some of you may know, Boulder came out very well in that after that incident and had minimal damage. So the importance of planning, having dual-use facilities, all of that is very near and dear to what planning is all about. So what is a comprehensive plan? It sounds maybe self-explanatory, but it is a guide to physical growth and development. It focuses on what you see in the environment. That road out there, Townsend Avenue, is something that would be discussed in a comprehensive plan. Sidewalks would be in a comprehensive plan. The growth of the community, the parks, the river, all of those things are fair game in a comprehensive plan process. So it is a 20-year plan. We do have a kind of a 10-year focus. Implementation is a huge part of comprehensive planning, and so we want to have projects lined up as recommendations in the comprehensive plan that we can actually accomplish. And so that's a key part. We don't want it to sit on the shelf. A comprehensive plan should capture the community vision, values, and goals, and Amy will be talking about that later. It is a long-term plan for decision-making and implementation, and that should maybe go without saying. Some of you may have noticed the drawing in the lower right. One person in particular, I think, who recognized it, Jim Austin. He was a key part of the acquisition of water rights in the city in the 1970s. So back then, the city was experiencing a lot of growth. We're at the limit of they could get close to the limits of how much water they would need. So back then, the city lobbied for saving the Dallas project, which was the Ridgewood Dam. That gave the city 10,000 acre feet of water, which will allow the growth of the city up through 2050 and beyond. So I think what planning does is it kind of allows us to not think about problems that could be big problems. And water rights is something in the City of Montrose, or in Colorado, is a big deal. So there are a lot of communities that are coming up against limits to growth because of their limits in water rights. Montrose is not one of those cities, and we should be thankful to the long-range planning that happened back in the 1970s. So I really like to talk about the importance of a plan. A plan is important because we're dealing with really big issues. We're dealing with issues like affordable workforce housing. Do we have access, does the population have access to parks? To what extent are we going to provide mobility options for the entire population rather than necessarily relying on private automobiles as the only mode of transportation? And how should we manage growth? I think that is probably a matter of great concern, especially to this group. So this slide shows a number of examples of plans and being executed. The water sports park down at River Bottom Park came out of the 2008 comprehensive plan and the follow-up river master plan from 2011. So you go from a river that may be underutilized to building a project that is now attracting people from outside the area and is a great amenity to the people who live here. The roundabouts that have been under construction are in place. Those come out of the comprehensive plan's concern with moving traffic and preventing congestion in the community. The Connect project on the lower left, that's the new trail that's extending from the recreation center all the way up north to the Colorado Outdoors project. That's an example of, that came out of, started out in plans in the 1978, or back in 1978, where the plan recognized the river as a valuable asset, didn't necessarily put in a river trail. If you get to the 98 plan, river trail starts showing up, and conservation of the river corridor and public ownership of the river corridor to attain those objectives. Those get into the plans, and then now in 2019 we see the reality. And then on the lower right is construction of Hillcrest Avenue, the final segment of Hillcrest. That first appeared in the 1978 comprehensive plan. And so you see many years later implementation of that, and big gains, or an alternate transportation corridor for Townsend Avenue. So you keep seeing in the lower left, Envision 2040, that is our logo. We're looking at 20 years out. So potential themes of Envision 2040, land use and growth, recreation tourism. I'm just not going to read through all of them, but you see that these are the physical reality of the city. These are important topics for the growth of the community in many ways, not only the physical growth, but the economic growth, the growth of the population. Here's the estimated timeline for our project. We've had 2 community kickoff meetings, one English language and a Spanish language. We are attempting to be as inclusive as possible, get more of the population involved. We did, that was kind of a groundbreaking effort, and we will continue that. We will have translation services available at those at the future community workshops that you see listed on your handouts. We are at the initial assessment stage. We're moving into the vision, goals, and issues. A number of of important issues were identified in those kickoff workshops. And in the subject area workshops that are coming up in July and August, we'll focus more at specific areas like transportation or parks or land use and growth, economic development, housing. So we're very early in the process. This is going to go through the fall of 2020 before we have a final document. But we're excited to get as many people involved, and there's going to be many chances to get involved. I don't want to necessarily tip off what Amy's going to be talking about, but that handout provides the website, and so if you would like to provide written comments or participate in a survey that we have, you can do that via the website, come out to the workshops, or simply send an email to the city. So now I'll hand it off to Amy, and she'll do some keypad polling with these fancy gadgets that we handed out.
Thanks, Gary. All right, so as Gary mentioned, we had some community kickoff meetings in early June, and the goal of this kickoff meeting was to just give an overview of what the process is, and then also get feedback from the community on what their vision and values are for the community, as well as what they would like to see created and changed within the community. I'm going to start out with a brief video that Will actually put together of our community kickoff meetings for those of you who weren't able to attend.
We have a jam-packed, very fast-moving, I think, 2-hour session tonight. This is our kickoff meeting. Here's a rundown of the agenda. Okay, we're going to talk about what a comprehensive plan is and why it's important. We're going to look briefly at some existing conditions and growth trends, always interesting. And then the fun starts. We're going to start talking about values and vision, and those are the things that kind of support. It may sound kind of touchy-feely, but those are the things that really support a comprehensive plan. So when we talk about vision and values, what do we get in that? Well, when we talk about vision, we're really asking the question, what do we want our community to look like in 20 years? So we're going far out within it, that is a 20-year at least horizon.
A comprehensive plan is a plan for the physical layout of the city. And that can take the form of anything from a building to a trail, park, streets, neighborhoods, commercial areas, industrial areas, the river, and anything associated with the river. So it really encompasses the physical reality of what we have in our community. Our last comprehensive plan was in 2008. And it's important to update comprehensive plans. They are trying to look out 20 years, which is really tough. So what we want to do is update it as we kind of get a handle on how growth is playing out, and it's just a different reality we have today in 2019 versus 2008. It's a much different world, and we need to stay up with the times. A comprehensive plan is a plan for the future, and that may sound a little intangible, but it really is important because that's the future we're all going to live in. I personally have lived in Montrose for 20 years, and I've seen how the community has changed over 20 years. It's huge. But maybe the most important thing for people is to remember, this is the community they're planning for their children. So 20 years out, what kind of a town do you want in place for when you are older, but also what kind of town are your children going to live in?
Okay, so next we're going to use those little fun devices that you see in front of you. First I'll give you some instructions. Don't push any buttons. I know it's tempting, but just wait. They're not going to register. Nothing's going to show up until I actually get to a question and tell you that the keypad polling is now open. So until then, if you push buttons, nothing's going to show up. Once I do tell you that the keypad polling is open for that particular question, you'll want to look down at your screen, kind of as you're pushing the button. You'll see this little symbol show up in the upper left-hand corner, and then as you push your answer, you'll see the answer show up on the little screen there. You can change your vote as long as the polling is open. I'll probably give you guys about 10 seconds per question, so if you want to change from 1 to 2, that's fine, but your vote's only going to count once. And then I'll let you know when the polling is closed for each question as well, and then I'll show the results for you. Did everybody get a little response card? If you didn't, you want to raise your hand and we can pass one out to you. I think we have a few extras. There's some people in the back that didn't get one.
Is there anyone else who needs one?
Another here.
I'm done. I think everyone's got one.
Yep,
No?
I think they got them, so those of you that were...
Okay,
Ann.
whoever wants to.
Ann, can you bring one more right up here?
Yes, yes. There's an extra. Sorry.
Right here. Right here. There. Yeah, just put one on the table. I saw they were short one. Thanks.
Sorry.
Okay, everybody's got a card? All right. So we're going to start with just a few easy questions to get everybody used to the keypad polling devices. So the first question is, how long have you lived in the Montrose area? Polling is now open. Okay, and just so people know, like I have a little screen here and I can tell how many responses I've received, but your answers are all going to be anonymous. Like I can't track who gave what answer, so. In the future you might be, so. All right, polling is now closed. Looks like we have about 82 people. And the highest amount was most people here have lived here 11 years or more, with the next one being 1 to 5 years. Okay, next question. Where do you live? Polling is now open. Okay, polling is now closed. And it looks like the majority of the people here live either within Montrose city limits or Montrose County. Okay, next question. What is your favorite activity from the ones listed here? Polling is now open. Okay, polling is now closed. Let's see what the most popular activity is for this room. Hiking, running, and walking. Followed by biking and skiing or snow sports. I guess we're a room of non-traditional sports. Okay, next question. What is your favorite outdoors destination within 30 minutes of Montrose? Polling is now open. Okay, polling is now closed. Looks like the majority, spread out quite a bit. Black Canyon and the Gunnison National Park, followed by the Uncompahgre Plateau, and then Ridgeway State Park. That's interesting. I'd like to know what else some of the others are. Okay, now we're going to move into some of the more detailed information on our community kickoff meetings. So at our community kickoff meetings, when people came into the room, we gave them this little handout you see that says, is what I love about Montrose. And so what we wanted to get at is just asking the community what it is that they love most about Montrose. These options that you see here were the themes that we saw most on these cards. And so we're going to vote today and see from the most popular votes from the community kickoff meeting what you love most about Montrose based on those options. So polling is now open. Oh, and outdoor opportunities includes both things like hiking and parks and trails and that sort of thing around town. Okay, polling is now closed. And it looks like the top two options for this room were outdoor opportunities as well as the rural small town feel and community and people. Looks like our results today were very close to some of the same results that we saw from the community kickoff meetings. These are the combined results from both the June 11th and June 13th kickoff meetings. And community, family, and people ranked as the #1 thing that people loved about Montrose. That's what drives people to come here and what they love most about it. The next biggest theme that we saw on those cards were outdoor opportunities, parks, trails, and scenery and mountains. Okay, so on the video you saw a little fun pennies in the jar exercise that we did at the community kickoff meetings. This was a way for us to get feedback from the community on what they valued most about living in Montrose. We picked out 9 values that we thought would be kind of key to the community, and then we put those on jars. Everybody got 10 pennies, and then they were able to distribute those pennies in the jar based on what they thought was most important to them. So if they thought prosperity and opportunity was the most important to them above everything else, they could put all 10 pennies in that one jar, or they could just distribute them however they wish. And so we're going to do something similar today, but we're going to do the keypad polling because we thought the pennies might take a little too long. So we're going to vote now on what you think is the #1 most important value to you in this community. Polling is now open. Okay, polling is now closed. And it looks like the top values for this room were A and B, prosperity and opportunity, and stewardship of natural resources. I wanted to mention too that people weren't limited to only these 9 values. If they thought that there was something that they valued that wasn't on this list, we did have an other box where people could write in their vote on something that was very valuable to them. A lot of the things that we got for values were more tangible things, like things that they wanted to see developed within the community. So these are the top results combined from the 2 community kickoff meetings. So they had some of the same results that we saw today. The #1 choice was stewardship of natural resources, followed by prosperity and opportunity. So kind of just flip-flop from what we had in this room. And then safety and health closely followed. And you can see the list there of kind of how they ranked. The last exercise that we did at the community kickoff meetings was to get feedback from the community on what they wanted to see changed in Montrose, as well as the things that they wanted to see created in Montrose. People worked together in small groups and they wrote them out on flip chart pages, and then they would star their top 3 items that they wanted to see changed and the top 3 items they wanted to see created. And then this is just a summary of what the top change and create were from both meetings. You can kind of see from this list that housing, transportation, jobs, and economic stability were kind of the top themes that we saw from both of those change and create categories. All right, next we're going to talk about our current vision and guiding principles from the current 2008 comprehensive plan. So this nice long vision statement that you see is actually our current 2008 vision statement. It's actually really important because it's what guides how we manage the city. And this came about from public comment during the 2008 comprehensive plan. During this process, we're going to be asking the community the same questions. We're going to be asking, what do you envision for the community of Montrose for the next 20 years? And that vision statement may be very similar to what we have now, or it may be completely different, or just some small edits, but we do want people to start thinking through what they envision for our future. As you can see here, the current vision statement has some really important values and themes such as diversity, environmental resources, thriving economy and opportunities, parks, jobs, housing, and transportation opportunities. Also, during the last comprehensive plan process, these 8 guiding principles emerged to help guide the city's efforts for the community vision and values. And we keep referring back to these guiding principles whenever we're making decisions on, the future development of the city. So during this process, same thing. We'll be reevaluating these guiding principles and thinking through whether they need to be changed completely or just edited a little bit. A lot of these themes that you see in the guiding principles are actually very closely tied to the values from the current vision statement, as well as a lot of the values that you guys have seen come about from the community kickoff meetings. Okay, now I'm going to have Gary talk about existing conditions and growth trends.
We're back online. All right, so I'm going to talk about the history of Montrose, at least superficially. Here is a map, or a number of maps, showing the physical growth of the city. And you can see our little animation on the lower left, showing 1882 all the way to the current year. Montrose started out as a roughly 1 square mile town centered on the railroad to around 17 plus square miles today. So you have 17 times the original size in terms of growth. This map, or these set of maps, also shows that there were periods of relative stability in terms of how big the city is, to some periods where it just changed radically. And beginning about 1990 to 2010, there was, I believe that was at least a doubling or tripling of the physical size of the community. Population trends. So on this graph, the city population is shown in red and is on the bottom. So going back from 1950 to some projections out to 2050. The county population is in blue on the top, and we did try to be consistent with the colors, kind of the themes of the city versus the county. So we've got the Montrose red on the bottom, and kind of the blue seems to be the county's preferred color on the top. This graph also shows the city as a proportion of the county. So it's roughly around half of the overall county population. So Montrose is the county seat, and it is clearly the dominant community within Montrose County. This is where most of the people work. This is where government is centered. This is where a lot of things happen, where the shopping is and where the health care is provided. I would like to maybe go back to one of the keypad polling results. The one that asks you where you live, city versus county, it's actually somewhat surprising that only about a third of the folks here are outside the city limits, because the daily population of Montrose virtually doubles every day, because the population within 10 miles of Montrose is equivalent to the population of Montrose itself. So I'll go into this a little bit more, but Montrose is, as a result, a relatively, or whatever word you want to use, it's a pretty low density community. So there's a lot of people spread out in the surrounding area, and they kind of converge in the city for various services and jobs. So this map shows a lot of things. It shows the city limits, it's kind of outlined in gray. The yellow areas are the areas that are generally built up as of today. The areas that could be available for future growth are shown in tan. And as you can see, a lot of that is already in the city limits. It's already got that kind of gray line around it. There are some fairly large areas that have developed as 1+ acre subdivisions. Those are shown in kind of an orange color. And those are areas that are not available for future growth of the city. The tan areas are relatively large lots, could be redeveloped as large subdivisions, and possibly new commercial centers. Depends on what the outcome of the comprehensive plan is. So getting this kind of baseline information is important to letting us know what we're working with. So population density. These maps show a couple things. The one on the left, again, shows the city limits, which are kind of a lot of squiggly lines as a result of some of the explosive growth we had in the 1990s for the most part. So on the left, you've got the most dense areas shown in dark blue. So most of that, it's centered around South Townsend, East Main, Niagara Road, possibly down or to Oak Grove Road, Ogden Road, if you're familiar with all these roads. Ogden Road is down by the Community Rec Center. You've got a much less dense area in there. And in fact, the city limits encompass lots of areas that have extremely low population density. So in other words, those have not been developed yet. And that's maybe more, we tried to show that a little bit more clearly on the map on the right. So, you've got all these areas, everything colored on the map on the right is in the city limits, but the yellow areas are generally vacant in agricultural use. So this is really important when we're talking about comprehensive plan and where the density should be in the future. We should be more dense, less dense, where commercial should be, where the park should be, etc. Okay, so now we're going, that was quick. We're going back into some keypad polling questions.
Okay, I'm going to use your keypad polling devices again and ask some questions that maybe are a little bit more in-depth than the first few that we went through. So growth and development, as Gary touched on, are actually signs of a very healthy economy. Over the next 10 years, what do you think the ideal population growth of Montrose should be? Anywhere from 0 to 7% per year, the options we have here. Polling is now open. Okay, polling is now closed. And it looks like the majority of the room here kind of sits right in the middle. Kind of looks like people want an estimated 3% per year. As we think about how our community should grow, we should also think about where the neighborhoods and commercial centers should be. Should they continue to be located, along Townsend Avenue and Main Street, or do you think we should create neighborhoods with commercial centers within walking distance of neighborhoods, which is the next question. So if you agree that we should have neighborhoods with commercial centers within walking distance, you would click strongly agree. And if you think they should be more located along like our major commercial centers are now along Townsend and East Main, you would click strongly disagree. So polling is now open. Okay, polling is closed. Looks like we have a really wide variety of answers here, which is good. Some that either very agree or disagree. A little bit of neutral. Nobody is very strongly opinionated, apparently. Okay, so this kind of asks the same questions, but in a different way. If you think that the commercial areas should be limited to Townsend Avenue, Main Street, downtown, kind of where they're at today, you would click strongly agree on this one. And if you disagree, strongly disagree. Polling is now open. Okay, polling is closed. And kind of similar to our last answer. Disagree and agree. Most people disagree, so that kind of looks like we have a variety of people who think we should kind of have more commercial centers outside of those areas. Okay, next we're going to talk about opportunities for you guys to get involved beyond Forum here today. You guys will all have a workshop flyer in front of you, as Judy Ann mentioned, and Gary did too. We're going to have a series of summer workshops where we're going to be talking about the various topics that are really important to a comprehensive plan. This is a list, and you also have it in front of you. All of the meetings, except for the Spanish-speaking meeting, are going to be held from 5:30 to 7:30, and then the Spanish-speaking meeting on August 26th will be from 6:30 to 8:30. They're all going to be held at City Hall in the Centennial Room, which is accessed just off of Centennial Plaza. We'll put up a little whiteboard or something so you guys can all find us easily, but we really encourage everybody here to come and let your voices be heard. We'll have light refreshments, so you won't go hungry. So the meetings will start at like 5:45 and 6:45, so just about a 15-minute time to have some refreshments and look at our maps. And then we'll break into small groups where everybody's going to get an opportunity to write on maps and sticky notes and give a lot of feedback on what it is that you want to see created in Montrose, what needs to change and what new things need to come to Montrose. We'll also have some interactive maps that'll be posted online. I think that's on this next page. Yeah, so our website is just cityofmontrose.org/comp-plan. That's where you can find all the information that you need to know on our process and what we're doing right now. The interactive map that I just mentioned should go live this weekend. You can go ahead and start plugging in your information there, or come to the workshops and get involved with your community and your neighbors and invite them to come, because sometimes you come up with a whole lot of ideas when you start brainstorming with others. So I think that's really important to come and get involved with the community that way. But if you can't make it to one or all of those meetings, then definitely log into our website and click the interactive map and put in your comments there. You can also do online surveys. I think Gary kind of mentioned this. Those questions that we went through from the community kickoff meetings, those are on an online survey, both in English and Spanish, and they're posted on our website. Those will stay open until the end of August. So if you couldn't come to the comprehensive plan community kickoff meetings and you would like to provide more in-depth feedback, we encourage you to do so. We'll provide you summaries of those probably in September, so that'll be open for another month. And we've been posting all the events on Facebook, so make sure you check those out. If you want to share them with friends, that's an easy way to do so as well. Next, we're done with the keypad polling devices, so if you will pass those down to the end of your table that way, or to the end of your rows this way, then we'll have somebody come around and pick all of those up for us.
How many times did you vote?
Oh, and if you want to be on our mailing list so that you get email updates, you can go to the City of Montrose Comp Plan website. There's a tab that says Get Involved, and under that it says Notify Me. Click Notify Me, and you'll automatically be logged onto our email system, and you'll just get email updates whenever something is posted to our website. After we get all the keypad polling questions.
Everybody ready for questions?
I'll be around.
Okay, who has questions?
I'll be around.
Envision 2040 appears to be a national initiative because when I Googled it, Envision 2040 came up for multiple cities across the U.S. But I couldn't find any information on where it originated and why it was adopted by so many cities across the U.S. It does appear to be a boilerplate template for city planning. Could you clarify that, please?
I'm not sure how to take that comment, but yes, I would agree that it is, it's a boilerplate template. I mean, it's not something that, it's not like part of like Agenda 21 conspiracy or anything. Joke, but it is a fairly common theme in comprehensive planning, because we're really looking to envision the future. I mean, there were some alternates that we considered, but this really seemed to capture what we're really trying to get at in this effort. Apparently, a lot of other communities are doing the same
Who
thing.
initiated it though? Where is the central creator of this?
Well, we all just kind of talked about options as a group, and
I mean national, like.
I have no idea. I don't know. There is no national effort, and that's why I was just kind of joking about, there's no coordinated effort to envision 2040 among different communities. This is a locally driven effort. This is our own grassroots effort. Of course, when we want to come up with methods of conducting public meetings and how to structure the project, we are looking at what other communities are doing for ideas, and it's pretty much as simple as that.
I can add one thing to that. Right now, there's just a lot of communities. As we've mentioned before, it's common for communities to update their plans every 10 to 20 years, so there's a lot of people updating their plans. And envision is just like you said, kind of a slogan. There's some people that said imagine 2040, some people say envision 2040, some people say looking forward to 2040. So it's just really a slogan that people use to think about what they're thinking forward to. And 2040 just happens to be the year that we're looking forward to because it's 20 years out. Some people might say envision 2030 because they're only doing a 10-year plan. So it just kind of varies by town. The envision is just really a slogan, and the year is based on how many years out your specific community is looking for your comprehensive plan.
So I attended the comprehensive kickoff meeting, and it was really good. You had a lot of nice visions and things like that, and one of the things you mentioned today that it was going to be reviewed every 10 years. I'd like to know what the process is in putting together strategic plans that would essentially be the city's implementation of that vision, and that those are reviewed every 5 years instead of every 10 years. And how that works, who directs that and so forth.
The city's going to use the input that we get from these public workshops as a basis to help identify potential projects that would be part of the implementation to make the vision a reality. Does that answer the question? That we really want to use that as the influencer. Sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing you. To just specifically get down to on-the-ground projects like what road is going to be built? Are we going to extend the river trail? That's part of that short-term implementation.
Gary, what I was talking about was, like public safety is down about 3 or 4 rows down there, and the city just voted to move forward with a public safety sales tax possibility.
Yep.
And so the question would be, to the police chief, what type of a strategic plan is he going to develop to implement that, that vision that we have that we want to have a safe community?
Yeah, so the comprehensive plan is a focus on the physical environment. And we're going to have the police chief attending every one of these workshops. He's going to say words about the importance of safety to that particular subject area. You imagine yourself like in a public park, there's safety issues. If you're on a public street, there's safety issues. Any public facility, again, there's safety issues. So it's going to be a kind of an underlying theme of the entire process, and then the outcome of the public input we get is going to lead to specific actions that we take. in relation to improve safety. We're not going to necessarily be talking about the staffing levels of the police department as part of the comprehensive plan, but we are going to be talking about how do we make the parks safer? How do we make sidewalks a safer experience? The roadways, driving to work a safer experience. All of that is fair game in a comprehensive plan.
Sure. Thanks, Jim, for that question. I think Gary pointed out an example of what we did in 2008 and 2011. Our 2008 comprehensive plan led into more specific plans, one on the river. So we actually created a Riverway Master Plan. That was a strategic plan on how we could best take the input that we received in the 2008 comprehensive plan, really focus in on the river. I think some things that we're thinking about in the future is a new downtown development plan. That plan is pretty old, 2003. So we'll learn what we can from in the comp plan, and that will inform us in these more strategic plans that you're referring to on specific areas of the community. And certainly law enforcement, public safety is a big part of that.
Hey there. Are the respondent demographics being gathered and considered when evaluating the results that are obtained?
Absolutely. We pay very close attention to skewing the demographic. We know, for example, that Montrose is 20 plus Hispanic. So whenever we get like preferences or goals that come from certain groups that are overrepresented, we want to take that and kind of weight it and make sure that demographics like Hispanics or Spanish speakers are represented. We want to make sure that families are well represented because when we're talking about Montrose in 2040, I mean, I hate to break it to you, but some of us aren't going to be here. Whether you move away or something else happens. But the children are going to be here, and we really want to have a community that suits what they need. So that is, we're not going to just or take input from, say, the older demographic and go with it as representing the community. We want to get that. We want to just bring out that kind of representation from the groups that are going to be living in this community in 20
So
years.
you are gathering demographic data and keeping it attached to the results so that you know how to interpret the results?
Yeah, we make a big focus on that.
My only experience is coming from a community back in Iowa that went from 50,000 to 250,000 people. But the idea is we need to know where the infrastructure is going to be in order to plan for the future. And I'm mainly talking about a bypass, roads. Those need to be in place before you can make any of these other decisions. And I do not see in this community any long-term plan for a bypass which would benefit the community as well as those people who don't want to stop in Montrose, who are going to Telluride or wherever. That's where I think the focus principally needs to be.
July 25th. Transportation and mobility.
Thank you for that comment. Yeah, so
roads planned.
I agree with you. I think it's a safety issue as well.
Thank you for saying that. So July 25th, there will be a workshop that focuses on transportation mobility, and those kinds of comments. I'm sure there will be other folks who have a similar comment. There may be folks who have different comments. But I would like to point out that we're kind of building on plans that were adopted going back to 1961. I haven't been able to locate a copy of that, but the 78 plan it's pretty clear. It identified 6700 Road as a continuous roadway going down to from Highway 50 to Ogden Road. We've actually, in the 2008 plan, that got extended down to at least Oak Grove Road. So we have identified, what I would call the skeleton that's going to support the body of the future of Montrose. And we are actively implementing that, as you saw with the construction of Hillcrest Avenue. I didn't show the recent construction of Oak Grove down east of Walgreens, but that is occurring. So thank you.
There needs to be more education in parks. There's needles, syringes, medications in a lot of your parks. During the summer, these kids are out there playing and they are picking these different things up, and there needs to be more awareness made of that. And we're seeing more and more of it in the Rotary parks and different things like that. We need to get better all up on that.
We had a little bit of a technical issue with that microphone, but I did identify most of your comment, which was dealing with disturbing needles and other, was it medical waste?
Syringes and the medical.
Syringes and other items in the parks. I know that's definitely has the attention of the city, and there's other police department and the parks department is currently dealing with that issue.
Gary, out of curiosity, you talked about the last comprehensive plan and kind of piggybacking on roads. When things are identified 20 years ahead and you go 20 years down the road, how many times do you have to adjust and change? When I think about the roundabouts, were those earmarked 20 years ago, or was that kind of as we go down the road, you determine those are needed? How flexible do you have to be, and how flexible do you find that you are?
Well, the roadway network is pretty straightforward. The major roads in general are at 1 mile intervals based on the public land survey system going back to when settlement occurred in the west. So the major road network, pretty clear. What happens within that to improve it, secondary roads, that is a little bit more flexible. What happens at the intersections, that kind of evolves with best practices. So at one time, a stoplight was always the solution to a major intersection. That has changed, and we have found, the engineers have found, other communities have found that roundabouts work very well and are a better investment over the long term in terms of traffic safety and traffic movement. So we kind of adopt and look to become flexible to adopt the best practices that we can identify.
Just add a little bit to that. I think when you think about transportation grid, it starts out of focus or not as focused. As time goes on and we see the demands, I think the engineers call it warrants. So we look at every intersection, do traffic counts before some improvement happens. And when we come to that point that we need to make a change due to those studies, we look at the best practices that are in place at that time to make the right decision on how that's done. So I think in these larger plans farther out, we talk about the grid or how routes may look, but we don't identify where those are going to be. If they're a new route, it's typically expanding on a route that's already there, improving that, giving it higher capacity. So roundabouts typically may be talked about in general in the plan, but not necessarily where they would be, because those are defined by the actual warrants of what's needed at a particular intersection.
When I arrived 27 years ago, I found it very interesting that it was generally promoted from a planning perspective that Montrose was restricted in its growth by being surrounded by public lands. And the number that was generally discussed was a 30,000 population. I realize we're now talking in 50 of a 32,000 plus. Is that been discussed as far as how we are restricted by the public lands? And thank you.
Well, the public lands in general are 5 to 10 miles from the city. So it's pretty well beyond our growth area. I mean, there's a few little spots we might be nudging up against a few remnant BLM parcels. But for the most part, I'd say that's a kind of a county growth concern more than the city. We're not looking at butting up against public land anytime soon.
So the county growth really exceeds. Thank you.
Is this tied into the opportunity zones that was presented last week?
Well, not directly, but the opportunity zones, that's a investment tool and hopefully an investment vehicle for major new projects that could occur that could help implement certain aspects of the comprehensive plan. For example, affordable housing or attainable housing. There may be other projects that the opportunity zone is suited for.
I would say, in general terms, yes. You see the opportunity zone, the census blocks that were recommended and ultimately assigned for this area are areas that typically haven't seen that commercial growth or residential growth. So they're to the north of town, to the west of Main Street, or Main and Townsend. So I say, yes, I think they are tied to it. But and certainly our comprehensive plan, the 2008 plan, was reviewed when we made those recommendations where growth may need some encouragement, and that's the whole reason behind the opportunity zone.
Questions? Okay, Mark, I'm coming.
It must be a real dilemma when you see the graphs that show agree, disagree about balance. And I'm wondering if more discussion would not get you there where people understood. Well, think about this commercial development off Townsend and Main. By that, do you mean a shopping center? Do you mean a convenience store or what? It seems like a little more discussion would have resulted in more agreement from the audience.
Oh, thank you for that comment, Mark. Yeah, we will go into more detail of that during the workshops, and it's good to get that kind of feedback. We are generally just talking about more of the convenience commercial. It may be, a coffee shop, laundromats, maybe not so useful, but a gas station or a small convenience retail, where you want to get a jug of milk or a loaf of bread at the spur of the moment. So it's not, you're not talking about like a Walmart.
Just a second, I'm going to make a comment since I have this opportunity. There are very few city council meetings that we go to that the question isn't asked, does this fit the comprehensive plan? So staff either addresses it, you'll hear quite often if you listen to city council meetings, Gary will say, this fits the comprehensive plan, okay? Or we ask that. So it's not that this is a dead document that sits on a shelf. It's a constantly looked at, what's in the comprehensive plan? Are we addressing it? Is this going to fit?
For properties that are not in the city limits but are within the city growth boundary, what is the agreement the city has with the county when it comes to zoning and replatting?
So the area just outside of the city, roughly within 3 miles of the existing city limits, is subject to an agreement between Montrose, the City of Montrose, and Montrose County. So with the exception of the West Montrose Sanitation District. So that's an independent sewer district where development referrals that require new sewer generally come to the city. If they're in that district, they do not. And that's the area that's kind of down by Marine Road and Spring Creek Road and points roughly south, ending right before you get to Cobble Creek to the south. So we have an agreement in place, and then these, generally it's been pretty small projects where somebody wants to do a 2 or 3 lot subdivision, comes to the city, or they come to the county and then they get referred to the city. And then we need to make kind of an individual judgment call about whether it makes sense for that to be in the city or not. And that roughly, I would say, 50% of the time or more, it kind of gets kicked back to the county to just do somewhat minimal development if it's just building a house or something like that. But at the same time, that's an important growth tool. And it's something that came out of the planning efforts we had in the 1990s. What was happening at that time was there were a lot of large lot subdivisions, 1 acre plus, happening right at the periphery of the city. And when those proliferate, it may seem innocuous to have one here or there, but if the community allows that to happen with no hindrance, then you have no place to grow. You will have this kind of ring of low-density development surrounding the city, and that could, that's going to affect the cost of infrastructure. So, if you have to grow beyond that as a result, you've got huge costs to get, new urban centers beyond that, and then it just kind of generally leads to longer travel times and all kinds of other effects that long-term are going to be an impediment to our economic growth. So that's a key tool that we have, and I appreciate that question.
Guess what? My timekeeper tells me we are out of time. So please help me thank these people for